Mystical Makeup Monday, where we explore the tarot and do our makeup according to the card. We're using the Muse Tarot, a 78 card deck, including guidebook by Chris Ann. This deck was purchased on Amazon and arrived in less than 2 days. Hi, welcome to Mystical Makeup Monday. Today I'm going to be doing my makeup based on the card called the Hierophant. So in this card, I see something muted about the colors, something a little bit pastel. The sunrise is full of what could be considered bright color, but there is like a veil or an overtone to the whole situation, so it's slightly muted. I found that really interesting. There also seems to be a tempering of sorts, I feel like, to the color magic in this card. Like I said, a bit of a veil or muting, something like that. There's also a woman in her complete natural state. She's hugging her knees to her legs. She seems like she's kind of looking off in the distance. Her entire body is all one color except for the veil that she's wearing. She's not really looking below. She's not really looking up. She's kind of just looking out at maybe what she has created, where she's come, all that good stuff. The sky is full of these geometric sort of shapes and patterns, which might sort of represent the sunrise or the sunset in some way. One of those geometric shapes does appear to be bursting directly out from behind her, kind of like right behind her head. You can, if you look really closely, see a very small sliver of the sea poking out there. It's really tiny on the back right-hand side of that card, so you might have to look for it a little bit. There are 4 floating lanterns out there as well. They are either close to the ground or she is huge. It might be sort of putting into perspective how big she really is if that precipice is really that far back and she is still so large in comparison to these lanterns that seem to be more in the foreground. Then that might be an indication of how large this person has really become. There is another person, much smaller, in the foreground, and she is cloaked all in black. I do feel personally just like a bit of a feminine presence from this person. I get not ancient, but wise, like maybe someone who's been through these things before. This was kind of when I started to think these people might be on different parts of a journey or something like that. If you look really closely in the far left-hand side at the bottom of the cliff, you can also see the tiniest figure of a shadow. I got a more masculine feel from that figure for whatever reason. And that guy is so far away and so tiny that you can't even make anything out. You can't make out what he's wearing. You can't make out anything about what he looks like. He is a complete wild card, in my personal opinion. So I sort of got the impression that he maybe is just starting his journey and is looking up at what he's hoping to accomplish. She's sort of at the top, having reached the height of her journey. And this woman in the foreground has maybe been through all that and is just at a different place in her life and is kind of looking on longingly to the past or what these people are doing, something like that. And I thought that was really interesting. She almost feels motherly to me, gazed up at her, perched up there, and I thought that was really interesting. She's kind of clutching her cloak almost visually. I'm not sure if that has any meaning or not, but I did make a note of that just because I found it to be a little bit curious. If you pay really, really close attention to that tiny little human, I also felt like you might be able to make out the tiniest forms of a little backpack or something, which kind of did symbolize to me that maybe this was some sort of a journey. This card seems like a card of a journey, just like sort of a path, like a life path or a cycle or something along those lines. And that's what led me to this sort of feeling that these may be the different parts of the cycle kind of showing themselves in 3 different ways. If you look really closely, you can see some little golden lines all in the gray of the concrete ground in the foreground, and they sort of mimic the pattern of the sky and the stars. Those lines, if you look really closely, they really do kind of mirror what's happening up above. That you can see tiny little flecks of golden stars sort of in the background of this photo, and the exact same thing is happening down on the ground. I thought that was really interesting because it could symbolize the start and finish, the top and bottom, the sort of whole journey. So I made a very specific mental note of that, and I thought that was something really beautiful about the art in this particular card. I was thinking about the person perched up on the rock there, and I began to wonder if this person thinks they've made it and aren't aware that there's more yet to come in their journey, and the person below is kind of like, just like saying there's more to come, you know, like I thought that perhaps something like that could be happening in this picture. Diving right into the Hierophant and what this card means and what I was able to find in my research. So the Hierophant is a masculine counterpart to the more feminine High Priestess card, which I also found really interesting because when I was first looking at this card, I felt like it looked inherently feminine as opposed to masculine. And I found that very, very interesting. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there's nothing more masculine than the male patriarchy. And this is very much a symbolization of that, I think, to me. The beginning, the middle, and end, sort of where you are on the ladder, having someone above you, having someone below you, that sort of subservient like way of being and life. So I can see where this could be considered a masculine counterpart to the High Priestess card. I also was thinking that a system or an organization or a group is ranked one above the other, like person's just starting their journey, person at the top of their game, person who's lived their life, you know what I mean? Like, and is now teaching. So that's also sort of a authority. Like it reminds me of authority and status and sort of things like that. So I thought that also feels masculine to me. So it makes a little bit more sense to me, the whole idea that this is supposed to be a more masculine feeling card. And I made my peace with it as soon as I thought about it for a little bit. Most importantly, this card can represent a mentor or a teacher, is something that I found during my research, which is really interesting considering I was paying a lot of attention to this like older woman in the foreground who's kind of looking up at the student. So that very much is a student-teacher relationship from my perspective. So it appears that the woman down below may be the sort of teacher the mentor who's been along the path, knows what there is to come, and can add value to this younger person's life if she was allowed to. And the research that I found really supported that idea that I had in looking at this card, and it actually really supported my intuition. It made me feel a lot stronger about my interpretation of the cards and what they mean. It's not always exactly on point with what the definition would be on paper, just because sometimes it is more of a feeling. But in this particular case, I feel like I was pretty spot on when I felt like the imagery spoke to me as a life path and as this older woman being a sort of a mentor of sorts. And this card can be an indicator, if you're pulling this card in a reading often, that perhaps you need to take a look at the more traditional ways of doing things or learning things. It could also mean, depending on the situation, if you're working in a group project, it could also mean that it's a good time for you to break the rules. If you've already learned something front to back and you kind of know the rules and you're doing something as a group, it might be a good time to introduce a new system or something that could be well received that isn't the typical way of doing things. So if you have some ideas, about a new way to do things and you've already taken time to learn and establish the ways that they're already done, and you find yourself in almost a leadership role or with an opportunity to present another option, it could be a really good time for you to do that. The reversed meaning of the Hierophant is a card that can mean that it's time for you to break the mold. It could mean that it's time for you to step outside the traditional and enter the realm of more unconventional. As many benefits as there are to thinking for yourself, there's also going to be pushback from those who expect you to live a more conventional life. So it could also signify tension in that department and potential strife from loved ones. In your career, the Hierophant could be a suggestion that now's a good time to introduce new approaches or an unconventional method and be met with success. Like we kind of talked about earlier, people who in a group setting at work might actually be willing to listen to you if you have gone through the process of learning the proper way to do something and are introducing a whole new idea. It might be a good time for that. In your career, it could also signify that there's a mentor on your horizon, someone meant to teach you things, and it's probably somebody who is in a leadership position. It could be some sort of boss. They're probably a rule follower, somebody who kind of likes to go by the policies and the normal processes set in place. It could be that they're there to teach you all the rules so that you could later learn the best way to break them and stuff like that. Or it could just be somebody coming into your life who's really going to take that role as like a teacher and a mentor, and that could be a really, really good thing. They usually are a process builder, an analytical thinker, so look for anybody like that who you feel drawn to, who you think might be able to teach you something. There also may be a pressure for you to conform to a group mindset. If you do happen to be working in a group setting on a group project or something like that, the group may be sort of pressuring you to abandon your radical ideas and expect you to sort of just like fall into line with the way that they do things there. So be aware of that as well. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing to break the mold. It's also a good thing to know the rules. So it can't really hurt anything for you to go out of your way to learn the way things are done in the first place. It will only give you a better understanding and help you along your path when you're forging new ideas and creating new structures. Let's talk about love and the Hierophant. In your love life, if you're in a relationship, you are definitely going to want to put your commitment pants on when you get this card, because it could mean that something much more committed is on the horizon. It could be something as big as an engagement or a wedding or a child, but it also could be something like moving in together, just depending on what stage of the relationship you're in. Regardless, it's definitely a sign that you're in a more long-lasting and committed relationship. You're not necessarily just having a fling. If you are single and you're dating, I would keep in mind that this could signify that your next relationship and or the next person that you enter into a relationship with may be looking for something more, or this may be a good time to get something more from that relationship. It's probably not going to be a fling or a one-night stand. Of course, this isn't always. These are just indicators, and things can change just depending on what's going on in your life specifically and stuff like that. But in general, this card is a sign of a bigger commitment, because we know that this card is kind of about structure and traditional ways of relationships, monogamy and marriage and stuff like that. To wrap things up, the Hierophant is a card of masculine tradition and authority. It's a card of traditional values, conventional methods. It's a card of paths and getting to the top and learning the ropes and having wise ones to teach you along the way. It's a indicator that you're definitely in for some growth, and I would take it as an overall neutral card in my personal opinion. Having mentors is a positive thing. Finding your way along a path is a positive thing. Learning things is positive. Even if you find yourself to be less traditional and more unconventional, I feel like education is key, and some of the most highest forms of education in our country come from establishments such as university that are rich in tradition, and higher learning and deep involvement in education in general can only better someone on their path to success. Imagine someone who's a free thinker with very forward thoughts and ideas, with the educational background that it requires to dive deep into understanding where people came from so that you can teach them new ways of thinking. I find this card to be really positive in that way. There's nothing inherently negative about this card. The only thing I could think of that someone might take to be not the most positive thing is the fact that growth can be uncomfortable. Learning can sometimes be uncomfortable when you don't know something and you're expected to learn it from scratch. You don't know what you're doing. You don't just walk into the situation knowing where to go, and that can be extremely uncomfortable. So if anything, I would say that the card is maybe not negative or inherently negative. It's more of a positive card and has more positive meanings, but it might not necessarily equal comfort. Thanks for watching Mystical Makeup Monday with me learning all about the Hierophant, and thanks for watching my little pastel rosy makeup that goes really beautifully with this card. I had a fun time doing it, and I hope you guys tune in next time. 웃고 있는 내 모습은 진짜가 아니야. Da